We're joined by the candidates running for Spokane City Council in District 2. District 2 is mainly the South Hill, but it also extends to the West Plains and includes homes near the Spokane International Airport. Breean Beggs is the incumbent in this race. He was appointed to the City Council to fill a vacancy. Business owner and former Park Board member Andy Dunau is the challenger. Thank you both for being here, and so we'll get right to the questions. So we'll give you a soft landing first, Breean. You win the election, you're sworn in, so what's the first priority for you?
Top priority in Spokane from all my constituents I've been working for are streets and crime reduction. That's what City Hall is about. We've been doing a great job. We've spent record amounts in the couple of years I've been on the council. We're going to do more, and we're trying to do it really in an integrated fashion. So when we open up a street, we're dealing with the sewers, we're dealing with bus stops, everything so that it's built to last. And we're prioritizing the roads that we use most often. On crime reduction, most of that has to do with criminal justice reform, that I've been leading the campaign for smart justice. And really, it's about dealing with people, what the problems are, but we need enough patrol officers to catch them, and then we'll rehabilitate them.
Okay. Andy, you're elected, sworn in. What's first?
My number one issue is definitely streets. When I doorbell, that's the number one issue on people's minds. And as I like to say, just because we're spending more each year doesn't mean we're doing better. We need to take a look at those metrics, take a look at what materials we're using, take a look at what standards we're using compared to Chicago, North Dakota, Milwaukee, and other places. And we really need to make sure people are getting the value for their services. And right after that would be police and fire, and establishing the metrics and the accountability for how new police officers will be used.
Okay. So on the same ballot that your names are going to be on, you'll also, the voters will also see Proposition 2, which many know as the Coal Train Initiative. It's the initiative that would fine people and companies that move rail cars with uncovered loads of coal or some types of oil through certain parts of the city. What's your position on Proposition 2?
Well, I want to be clear that I am pro-rail safety and pro-prudent improvements in rail safety. Prop 2 is just the wrong way to go about it. It's unconstitutional because it runs afoul of the Interstate Commerce Clause. So to do it right, what we need to do is use the levers of power that our founders gave us. That means working with other municipalities and states to get with our federal elected officials and adjust the regulations and update the regulations to what we'd like them to be, whether that's stabilizing oil or other rail needs that we might find necessary.
Okay. Breean.
Yeah, I came to this because our local firefighters told me that we had a huge problem of this one kind of oil that's just recently coming through town. It's super explosive. And they said, and the railroads confirmed, that because of our elevated rail, it goes off the tracks, it's blowing up downtown, our high school, our hospitals, and there's nothing they can do to put it out. So it turns out it is constitutional if you follow the rules. And the rule is Congress said local jurisdictions can set safety regulations if the feds haven't done it yet. The feds are working on regulations for this new dangerous oil. And the governor's office and our senators want to do the same thing, which is simply ask the oil companies to take the liquid natural gas out before they ship. Once they do that, anything can go through the town, and we're safer the whole way. Spokane's the only place that can do it because Congress said the only place you can do it is if you have a unique danger, which we do because of our elevated rails. So it's a great way for the citizens to reclaim their safety with little burden to trade, and it really doesn't affect rail traffic.
So I guess in a yes or no, that's a yes.
Yeah, City Council hasn't taken a position on it, but I think it's probably a good idea.
Okay, so critics of the current council believe that the council is spending too much time on things like outside the purview of the council, and some might argue that the coal trains or the oil trains are one of those, but also, so what are your views about that? Is the council staying on the straight and narrow?
Yeah, so the couple of years almost that I've been on the council, we've been working on what matters to people. So people come to us and they say, this is what we're interested in. Sometimes it touches on national issues, but our solutions are local. Immigration is one. We all know we need immigration reform, comprehensive, but that's not going to happen. So police came to us and said, we have a huge human trafficking problem in Spokane, and we need the victims of those crimes to be able to come to us and report it without being in fear of being deported just because their papers are expired. So we passed a law about that said, no, police, don't be immigration officers. So that is kind of a national issue, but it really deals with the issue here. Same with climate. We didn't put an opinion about the Paris Accords, but we make sure when we buy new garbage trucks, we use compressed natural gas. That's cheaper, cleaner. Same with building standards for city buildings. We make them energy efficient. We save money and it's good for the environment. And given the smoke, the snow, the floods, windstorms, we all have to do our part, but in a way that helps local people.
Okay, Andy, is the council staying within the purview of its authority?
No, it continues to go astray, and the Rails initiative that Breean authored is an example of that. And one reason you know it's unconstitutional is because other municipalities and even the local Center for Justice are not joining this ballot measure. When you look at things from elephant hooks to climate change to other things, they tend to be more political statements than anything else. And what that does is it distracts City Council from focusing on police, fire, Riverfront Park, other local needs.
Okay. So you've both made reference to this in your first answer. Mayor David Condon has proposed a budget that provides funding for new police officers. If that comes to pass, how and where do you think the officers should be deployed?
Well, property crime is currently one of the #1 priorities. Unfortunately, with both property crime and violent crime, Spokane is well above the national, state, and regional norms. So once you focus on property crime, you then need to decide whether you're focusing it on neighborhoods with hotspots of property crime. Are we going after things like nuisance housing? Or are we looking at the homeless issue downtown? Until we can settle on those priorities, we can't really divvy up those resources. And it concerns me when I hear that actually one of the justifications is we just want to reduce overtime pay. We can't have new officers coming on the force just to blend into the woodwork. We really need to be honest with the public about what are they going to get with those officers, how are we going to measure it so we know you got what you bought.
Okay. Breean, so you have a chance to sit with the police chief for a little bit and counsel him. What are your thoughts?
We do. You know, every month we sit down with the police chief and his leadership team and we figure out the plan to go forward. And #1 complaint for all constituents is response time. That's the #1 complaint. And there's a couple of ways that we're dealing with that. So the first is we are going to add more officers on patrol so that we have enough to respond. Second thing was an idea I put forward is creating a new job classification that's half the price of a police officer, a crime-solving technician that can respond to property crime that's not in progress for less money and do customer service and help folks. We increased neighborhood resource officers already to proactively work in the neighborhoods. We're dealing with the homeless folks. We actually have a very intelligent police force. They're doing great work. The only other thing that we've really looked at, too, is a few more traffic officers. So we're going to use those officers in real time and respond to crime the way we have. And crime generally in the last few years in Spokane has been going down. It's just until we deal with that drug and mental health thing proactively, then we're still going to have it. So it's not enough to arrest. You have to have a plan on what to do with the folks once you have them.
Okay, so you mentioned drug and mental health. So let's talk now about managing homeless people and the city's approach. How would you assess the problem, and what is the best approach to assessing it, addressing it?
Well, again, this is a national problem that we need to solve locally here. And there's really 3 different kind of classifications. There's the chronic homeless people who are unsheltered, really out just in the streets in the weather. And I help sponsor funding so that we now have 24/7 beds for all people who are unsheltered if they choose to have them, with social services there, transition to actual housing. That's one. The second level is there are people that are maybe couch surfing, a much bigger number, and we use social workers and rapid rehousing to get them into housing and restabilize them. And then the third is our housing market for entry-level housing is just tight, and we just don't have enough. And so I've been working with Jim Frank, who gave us Kendall Yards, and the home builders, to come up with some changes in zoning so that we can increase multi-use housing throughout the city where there's infrastructure, tax exemptions for multifamily housing downtown, so that we can solve all 3 parts of the problem at once. And we've made progress. We just have more to do. Okay.
Andy, think about homeless. What's the best approach in your mind?
Well, first of all, you don't put rocks underneath the freeway. And unfortunately, I still have not heard Breean express any regret for that decision. We do need the 24/7 system, but it's not on a sustainable path. So if we go through a downward economic cycle, that's going to be endangered. And what I've talked a lot about is the need to build information systems so that we can have coordinated care for these folks. You can't have 5, 10 different problems, employment, housing, and all the rest of it, have one person doing one thing and the other person not knowing what's happening. It's the same thing people have done in medical records. So until we get that coordinated care piece in place, we're just going to keep siloed activities happening, and we're not going to get on top of it.
I'll go for my rebuttal on that. And I'll just start with that because, again, we meet regularly with police and the folks that do homeless. And we do that. We have the 100 top people who are chronically homeless. The fire department has their people. The police are putting their people. So we can really proactively work on it at the same time, including community court. The same thing. They all work together to get people out of the system. What happened right at LC is at the parking lot, several students and teachers were assaulted by people coming out of the bushes. They weren't necessarily homeless. They were people engaged in criminal behavior. All we did was speed up the plan that was already there for the gateways. If you go to Division, you'll see Basalt Rock there. We dedicated one at Lincoln today, and we're going down to Maple Nash. We're going down that whole corridor, putting basalt in, changing the landscaping to make it safe, and it was not to get rid of homeless people. Actually, just the opposite. We put in 24/7. We have social workers. We're doing that work.
Okay. So a district-specific question. As development continues in the south part of the district, say around 57th, what are some of your biggest concerns as that the areas continue to grow?
That they keep their neighborhood character. So as you go to Regal and you see the big boxes that have gone in, that's really affected the character of the neighborhood in getting around. So we have some really good examples of character in the neighborhood, like the Perry District. But I think as we continue to grow, preserving that character, allowing those transportation corridors to work effectively, and making sure people are getting the services they need is really the essential question.
Okay. What about you, Breean?
You know what I look to is I go to the neighborhood council meetings all throughout our district, including Southgate, and work with them and figure out what's important to them and help connect them with the city. Recently, they came to me about arterials there, and I got the funding together so we can do a traffic study and figure out what are some small fixes in that will help traffic work better. The other thing that I have been in charge of with 2 other council members is spending a fund of money for traffic calming and safety throughout the neighborhoods. And each neighborhood puts their grant proposals together, and we work through it to make it work for them so the neighborhood stays walkable, it's safer, traffic goes more smoothly, and each neighborhood's different. But the big pressure for us is the county is approving lots of apartments outside of our purview and asking us to fund the streets and infrastructure. So we're working more closely with them, but there will be more problems before solutions until we really get the county in line with us.
Okay, we're going to go to the last question, and initially we were going to make it a yes or no, but we'll give you a little more time because we have a Riverfront Park Pavilion, cover or no cover?
Yeah, so my view on that is that we should use shading that's underneath the guidelines that are there, so not replace it the way it was in Expo 74. It's several $1 million cheaper to do that. You can get the same benefit of shade during a summer concert. They're retractable. And although I know some people feel strongly about it, I think we need to make changes on the fly with real data, and that $4 or $5 million can be spent doing other great things in the park.
What do you think, Andy?
I think the Riverfront Park redevelopment project has been badly managed. It's already $10 to $15 million over budget. They're continuing to play financial games. They said there was $24.5 million restored funding for the full pavilion. They released a budget in September which had $22.1 million. Just this week, they've announced they wanted to create an enterprise fund. That is not what the voters voted for. That's not what they expected. And it's a scheme and a scam. This project is getting close to out of control. It's a scheme because City Council wants to take over control of Riverfront Park, and it's a scam because it already runs $1 million deficit. Once you make it an enterprise fund, you can't use the 8% of the general fund to cover it anymore. So really, somebody needs to call a timeout and get the management structure straightened out, be transparent with people about what they're buying and what the alternatives are.
Okay. So thank you for answering the questions, and now we're going to go to closing statements. We'll give you each a minute, and we'll start with you, Breean.
Yeah, almost 2 years ago, there was an opening on City Council, and I'd done a lot of community work. I had a lot of opinions about it, and I applied for that position. And what I found out is there's a long learning curve. We do so many different things. We approve all the policies, all the budgets. We pass laws. And it wasn't working that well because council and the mayor weren't working that well together at the time. The mayor was under investigation from the Chief Straub. And I started working with senior cabinet members and city council, and I was a part of putting together a strategic planning process. And you don't read in the paper that council and the mayor. I think on one hand have been the ordinances that the mayor hasn't liked that we've done and didn't sign. So we're doing well. We have record construction, and we have record work on streets. I agree there's some issues on the park board, and I was surprised that Andy ran this time because he could have applied before. He knows a lot about the park board. He left the park board early without telling us what needed to be done to fix, and I think that tells us what might happen on city council.
Okay, Andy, your chance to wrap it up.
Sure. I'm running for city council to try and restore balance to council. Currently, it has a 6-to-1 super progressive majority that's giving us a Seattle-light style of governments with more taxation and more regulation every year. Breean, in the last 18 months, has proposed no less than 3 taxes. Okay? When I think about taxes, I don't just recognize that it's bad for the economy. I recognize that it hurts people who are struggling. I'm thinking about grandma who's on a fixed income. I'm thinking about single parents with 1 or 2 kids. I'm thinking about working class families. Our job is to put more money in their wallets, not put it in city council coffers. So my approach is really to bring fiscal conservatism back to city council, to focus on our government priorities like police and fire, and to make infrastructure investments, to embrace innovation and efficiency, to make sure that, in fact, that Spokane's customs and values that have made us great in the past make us great in the future. So what I'm trying to do is bring that back to City Council and do it in a way which has transparency and integrity.
So that'll do it for round 2 of the KSPS coverage of the Spokane City Council races. Our thanks to Breean Beggs and Andy Dunau running in District 2. So stick around, we're going to bring you the candidates running in District 3 next.